As a child, I loved to go to Fitzgerald's department store downtown, primarily because we didn't get to go there often, only on very special occasions, around our birthdays, around Christmas, and maybe if Mom needed a unique gift. It was a department store. It wasn't like Newberry's or Ben Franklin's. You would go in and there were separate sections, men's, women's, children's, and upstairs, the toys. You climbed flight after flight of stairs to get to them. And oh, what mystery was held there. Toys that you could not get anywhere else in town, bicycles and wagons, all manner of exciting things. Some days, Mom would leave my brother and I up there alone just to look while she did her shopping. It was a heaven. But even with all of that, what I remember most about Fitzgerald's and what most of my friends still talk about with me is the process of checking out. You would hand the clerk your money for your purchase, and she would carefully put it in a canister, and she would screw it into its top, which was hanging from a wire. And then there would be this whirling noise, and suddenly it would just take off and disappear into the darkness of the next floor up. And before long, it would come back down. And there would be your receipt and your change if you had any coming. It was awesome. And this was going on throughout the store. All the departments had these canisters going up and down, whirling and swirling, back and forth. It was like magic just to watch. In fact, I still have not been able to wrap my mind around the mechanism that made it work. Sending it down makes sense. Getting it up, I have no clue. Wild stuff. I'm not sure why, but perhaps it's the way my twisted mind is wired. But whenever I hear the story of Jacob's ladder, I'm immediately transported back to Fitzgerald's. Perhaps it's the idea of that stairway up to heaven, the toy store. But I think it has more to do with the whirling wings of the angels and their ascending and descending like that coin canister, bringing blessings to Jacob. When we last left Jacob last Sunday, he had just conned his brother out of his birthright for a bowl of stew and had, with his mother's help, duped old Dad into thinking that he was his hairy brother Esau and got the parental blessing as well. Well, needless to say, staying home wasn't really an option any longer. It wasn't terribly safe there for Jacob. It was only a matter of time before good old twin Esau stopped pouting and started pounding. And so at his mother's advice, Jacob took off for a far country to go hang out with her brother, good old Uncle Laban. And it's there we encounter him along the way, resting for the night. He is in the midst of a dream, a ladder that stretches from heaven to earth, a stairway to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. And it is from that vision that God speaks to Jacob, a twofold word of blessing. The first is that the promises that God made to his grandfather Abraham and to his father Isaac are now commuted to him. He is the blessing, the promised child, through which God will now bless his descendants. That's good news to Jacob, because frankly, he got the inheritance and the blessing before in rather dubious ways that you had to wonder if they were going to really hold up in the heavenly court. And so God validating Jacob as the promise bearer really makes Jacob's day. Jacob will be the blessing through which God blesses the future generations. The second part of the blessing is that no matter where Jacob goes, God will go with him. And no matter how far away it may be, God will always bring him back to this place, to home. That's good news to Jacob because he's heading off to good old Uncle Laban's, who lives halfway around the known world at that point, in a place that in a few centuries will be known as Babylon. How ironic is that? That in those days, they will be telling and retelling the story of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph to their people in the midst of their exile, in the midst of their fear that perhaps God didn't make the journey. That perhaps when God left the building in Jerusalem, he left them as well. But now in the promises made to Jacob, they hear the promises made to them. That no matter how far away they may be, God will be with them, even in Babylon. And like Jacob, he will take them home. It is a good news for those living in exile, like us. For certainly this is not the land of our home just a few months ago. It is a strange and foreign land, filled with all manner of confusion and chaos, frustration and anger, devastation, destruction, violence, hopelessness, helplessness, you name it. We're experiencing it at levels that are threatening to crush many and sending others over the edge. It is to us that God comes this day in this story with a word of hope and a word of blessing. That even in the midst of the exile that we find ourselves in, God will be with us and bless us. That he will be present among us. And that there is nowhere we may go or anything we may experience that God will not be in the midst of it. That when this is over, God will bring us back home. It may not be exactly the home we left, but God will make for us a new home, where we will dwell with him in this newness of life. It is here where the angels come in. Angel literally means messenger in both Hebrew and Greek. The angels are God's messengers, bearing God's word and promises to us. It is they who are even now gathering up our tears and our fears, our frustrations, our anger, our confusion, our railing, our doubts, our emptiness, or wanting just to hug somebody, our worries, our petitions, our desires, our hopes, our dreams, all of that. They're whirling around, gathering them up, putting the lid on, and off to God. And before long, they're back with God's answer. All that we need. Well, granted, it's not always what we want, but let's face it, it's all that we need. And I don't know about you, but these days, I don't need as much as I used to. And I'm amazed at how some of the simple things bring me great joy and pleasure and hope. I mean, remember back when this all began and you couldn't get a roll of toilet paper? Or you walked into the store and the shelves were empty? These days, when I want something, I text Walmart. I say, I want one of these, two of these, three of those, da 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 da, and I'll pick them up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And I drive down and open the back of my Jeep and they put it in and I'm all taken care of. It's a miracle. What a gift. Crazy. But it's enough. Some days it's enough. A piece of bread, a sip of wine, to stave off the hunger of our souls and the weariness of our wandering and restore our joy and our hope. Sometimes it's a text. Sometimes it's a note sent or a phone call made. Sometimes it's a greeting delivered behind a mask or a wave from a neighbor. Maybe it's a drive-by greeting. Maybe it's a mysterious gift left on the doorstep or a present sent from an old friend you haven't heard from for years. Perhaps it's picking up a tool and then remembering the life of the one who gave it to you and smiling. Perhaps it's a bouquet of flowers. Who knows what those whirling wings will bring? But the promise is that they will bring God's grace and blessing. And no matter how small, it will be enough to sustain us and to lead us forth. It will remind us that we are the blessed ones of God, and that even in the midst of this exile, when nothing seems certain, we can cling to that promise, and the promise that God will not leave us orphaned, but will go with us wherever we are, in whatever life circumstances may greet us. And he will be in the process of bringing us home. It may not be the home we left, these many months ago, but it will be home, for he will be there with us to guide and to comfort us. We are the blessing of God, sent to be a blessing upon the world we live in. It's not an easy call that we have been given these days, but we are called to be repairers of the breach, We are called to build up and not tear down. We are called to heal and not destroy. We are called to dream impossible dreams, knowing always that it is God's work that we do, and it is God working in, with, and through us, that God will continue to bless us and the world in which we live. One of the small blessings that I've received in the last couple days is remembering. Remembering a gift that was given to me decades ago by my Aunt Marie. I used to work her gardens for her, and it was in the midst of the gardens that I discovered a statue. Never wanting to miss an occasion to tell a good story, my aunt told me about St. Francis. In these last few days, his writings have seemed to pop up all around me. And in them, I have found courage. And so I'd like to leave you today with the prayer of St. Francis. And may this guide us as we continue to do the work that God has called us to do, to be his messengers of hope and health. Let us pray. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Don't ever be discouraged, for Jesus is your friend. And if you lack for knowledge, he'll ne'er refuse to lend. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.